when whippoorwill call, and evening is nigh, I hurry to my blue heaven.
G'day and welcome to My Blue Heaven. I'm going to try and make this pretty short and sweet, this edition, heading up into a pretty important weekend for our football club, our last hit out before we take on the Tigers in round one, which is, only about 15 days away. Pretty exciting stuff. So really important weekend coming up. We need to really hit back hard after, a really unconvincing performance on the weekend and a very, very disappointing one. In fact, I know just reading through social media over the last couple of days since the defeat over there in the West, a lot of supporters have been quite happy just to sort of sweep it underneath the carpet, and it's only a practice game, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter, but maybe so, that may be so. Hopefully in 6 or 7 weeks' time when we're flying and we're travelling pretty well, we'll just see this as a tiny little glitch, a little blimp on the radar. But I think there were a few little signs that I didn't like, and hopefully they can be rectified at training, and we can show a bit of performance this week against the Lions. Obviously, the big one was the skill level. It really was fucking suburban level stuff, wasn't it? I don't think I've seen a worse skill level in regards to kicking and handballing and fumbling from elite footballers, professional footballers for some time, and that's saying something. To me, this wasn't un-Carlton-like, and that was the most concerning thing. And I know people said that it doesn't really matter, but to me, it does. There seemed to be a lack of care with the way we use the ball. We put players under pressure. I don't know how many times we kicked the ball out in the full. We couldn't hit the side of the barn. Our forward entries inside 50 were disgraceful. And there was just a lack of care. I hope it was just something out of the blue, but as I said before, this to me was winding back the clock to about 12 months ago. And for me, I hope, for God's sake, that there's a little bit of rust and a bit of cobwebs there, where we can rebound pretty quickly. But as I mentioned, even in our performance last week against the Pies, I thought our kicking was poor then, or average, and we took it to another level against the Dockers, and that was really disappointing. We need to get that right. So apart from that, I can't really have any positives at all from the game. The fact that Willow and Doherty got through unscathed, another game under their belts was a positive. Martin did a few nice things in the first half with limited game time. But that was about it. Fisher won a bit of the ball, but everyone was responsible for their ball use, and I just thought it was really poor. And I thought the Dockers, a very young Docker outfit, and I know we had a lot out, both teams had a lot out, really showed us up on the way to transition the ball from the back half and hit up targets. The amount of uncontested marks inside their forward 50 and easy goals they were able to score really showed us up. I just thought, to go over there and put up a performance like that, after some positive signs last week, I did mention that it felt like a practice game against the Pies, and we're really exposed, whether it was the Dockers' pressure on us, whether we weren't, up to the task. We're just going to have to wait and see. We don't have many elite kickers in our team, and our game style does rely on really good ball use, and I think it must be a real concern for David Teague and the match committee. They must have been just scratching their heads at how terrible it was. So, that's all I want to talk about that game. Kicking 5-13 was not good enough. We want to be a high-scoring team. We want to, excite our fans. We want to play attractive football, but there was absolutely nothing attractive about that performance. And we continue to, I think, carry a lot of, and I suppose Cripper hit the nail on the head in an interview this week where he said, no more excuses for this football club in regards to our 21 to 23 year olds that we've carried passengers for a period of time now. We've made excuses for them. it's time to stand up. You know, we need to let the likes of Philp and Honey and Brady Kemp when he's right, and these first year players develop in the VFL. It's time for the likes of Dow, it's time for the likes of Lockie O'Brien and Zach Fisher and David Cunningham to really step up. They show small glimpses, but they just don't show enough, and you know, that's pretty disappointing. What I want to talk about briefly, I hope we really take this this game against Brisbane Lions really seriously in regards to a full dress rehearsal. Let's get the best possible team in this weekend. Send Philp back to the VFL. Send Moore and young Sturgis. I was a little bit disappointed we didn't get to see a little bit more of those two boys. Let's send them back to the VFL now and let's get fair income. So I want to touch on a couple of things. I want to touch on our back half. So we have Doherty and Tom Williamson, who have essentially missed 2 full years of football. I know Willow played the 2 games last year, but really he's been out of the game for a long time. And obviously Doc has missed, you know, the full 2 years with an ACL. And they both looked rusty on the weekend. And that was to be expected after, you know, playing, you know, full games the week before. And it's always a little bit more difficult the second time up. But both look really rusty. I don't think we can afford to take both into that big game against the Tigers in a fortnight's time. So I really see it's probably out of Doherty and Williamson who plays in that back half. And I don't really see a spot for Tom Williamson at the moment in our football team. So I'd like, even this weekend against Brisbane, that Williamson goes back to the VFL and spends an extended period of time back there, whether it's, you know, 3 or 4 weeks, just to get his touch. He needs to work on his defensive craft, and being out of the game for so long, he's missed out so much football. Whereas Doherty's a lot more experienced. He's got the runs on the board, and we can trust that at least, you know, as a captain of the football club, that, you know, he's able to put himself in the right positions, and there's probably a more specific role for him. Whereas with Willow at the moment, I think there's a bright future for this kid, but I just think he needs to go back. I know that's not going to sit very well with a lot of people, but I thought he looked really rusty, and I don't think we can take any risks with this kid into a really big game against Richmond round 1. I just don't think he's playing well enough. And, you know, it's going to be a huge risk to carry both Doherty and Williamson into round 1. Down the track, I can see Williamson coming in and knocking on the door and putting lots of pressure on the likes of Nick Newman, you know, a Lockie Plowman, even a Callum Marchbank, and obviously Simo on the verge of retirement as well. So it's not all doom and gloom for Tom Williamson, but I would love to see him go back and develop and essentially spend an extended period of time just honing his craft, getting some confidence. He's a big ball winner. I reckon he'll dominate back at VFL level and really work on that defensive part of his game. The second area of concern for me, obviously, is the forward line at the moment. What is that going to look like come round 1 against the Tigers? I'm really concerned the way it's structured up at the moment. There's a lack of defensive pressure and speed in there. Obviously, Eddie comes back. But, you know, how good is Eddie's form at the moment? Is a bit of a question mark on him. And my concern is our hybrid forwards. And I talk of Jack Silvani and Matthew Kennedy, who both predominantly played their big minutes in the first 2 practice games of this season against the Pies. And on the weekend, I know Kennedy went into the midfield and won a bit of the ball. I think he had 20 odd possessions, but it wasn't convincing 20 possessions. So I don't think we can play both in our forward half. So one has to go. And at this stage, I think Jack survives just because of his work rate. And I think they need him as that lead up, that hit up half forward who can take a strong grab. And he's really working hard at the moment, Jack Silvani. My concern with Jack, though, is that he just doesn't impact the scoreboard. I think as a hybrid forward, you know, we're relying on him to not only take a mark, but also, you know, be good at ground level. And he's just not scoring a lot of goals. And I think, you know, he needs to make the most of those opportunities in the forward 50. So it's a big watch on those 2 boys. I would like to see them trial something this weekend without a Matthew Kennedy down there and just have Jack down there. And even Kennedy go back to the VFL. I just can't see him playing on the ball at the moment. He's slow in there. His transition's slow, and I just don't think it's going to work to have both of those boys playing inside our forward 50. Fremantle were able to just bring that ball out of their back half with so much speed, and our lack of accountability, a lack of pressure on the ball carrier in our forward half was really disappointing. The other is the ruck stocks. What do we do? Obviously, Cruz is the number one ruckman. Looks to be pretty good at the moment. So where does that leave? Where does that leave De Conning? Where does that leave Pitnut? And does that leave Levi? Well, Levi stays, obviously. I mean, we need him in there at the moment as that key forward. I can't see Harry playing. I would not be risking both Harry, McKay, and also Mitch McGovern, two underdone players against the Tigers round one. We know how good at Richmond are at transitioning that football. They'll just absolutely murder us. So who comes in? I'd be inclined maybe to play both Pitnet and Cruiser. I'm not quite sure how they're going to structure it. I just don't think De Conning's ready. There's a bright future for Tom De Conning, but he doesn't do enough forward of centre. And I can't see that being a liable option against the Tigers in round one. So that leaves me, in regards to that, possibly Pitnet on the bench and giving Cruiser a chop out, and Cruiser maybe drifting forward and being a viable option forward of centre. We'll have to see how that pans out this weekend against the Lions. The other one, the interesting one for me, is what we do with Marchbank. Another one who's very much underdone. Can we play Plowman, Jones, Wiedering and Marchbank in our back 50? I say not. It's just not fast enough. It's just not mobile enough. So God only knows how that's going to work. Does Marchie come up to a wing? Because Jones is essentially a fullback and Wiedering is essentially a centre-half back or a fullback, and Plowman is your lockdown sort of defender who plays on a small or a tall, and where does that leave Marchie? It's a real headache for the match committee. Paulson's the interesting one for me. They've gone with him in the first two practice games as a lockdown as a small defender. He hasn't been disgraced, but gee, on the big stage against the Tigers, we know how dangerous they are. Rioli, Bolton, Castagna, just to name three of their live wire forwards. Does he get a role there? Will he play this week against the Lions? I think he may. It's a big weekend for him. As I said, he hasn't been disgraced, but we know it's another kettle of fish. I know we trialled Garlett down there last year in the same sort of scenario. He showed a little bit, but then when he got on the big stage, it all sort of came undone. Big weekend for a number of players to put their hand up. We appear to be carrying. If we're going to bridge this gap between us and the next, okay, which we'd like to do, we like to think that we're on level with the likes of St Kilda and your Fremantles who showed us up on the weekend, and all that team in the bracket of, I say, probably from 10th to 5th, to 16th. We'd like to think that we've got those teams covered, but if we want to bridge that gap, we need to start to see a little bit more impact from the likes of Paddy Dow and Lockie O'Brien, who hasn't played yet. David Cunningham's another one, 3-year contract last year. It really is time to step up. It's only February, I know that, but the time is now for us. And we're going to come up against some really, really stiff opposition in the opening two rounds of the year. I'm still very excited. I have my concerns. I hope that was just a one-off, but as we know with our football club, it can unravel pretty quickly if we don't get it right. I trust the process. I trust that we have the right people, in charge with David Teague and co. I hope Teague is really hard on that performance on the weekend. It's interesting, David Teague didn't front the media after the game in the press conference. That was left to Brett Stanton. I don't know how to feel about that at this stage. I don't think Teague's probably been in the job long enough to be sort of handing down those responsibilities to his assistants. Maybe I'm out of line with that. I don't know, but I just didn't think Brett Stanton gave us a lot in that press conference. there was a lot about learnings and blah, 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 a few little cliches. I would have liked to have heard from the head coach after such a disappointing performance. We'll get a lot back. Obviously, Cripps back, Murph back. So, obviously Murphy, a really good ball user. A little bit more class around that midfield, and hopefully we'll be able to put up a good show in a full dress rehearsal against the Brisbane Lions, who are a really, really good football team. Don't get me wrong, they're a good football team, and they'll rip us to shreds if we turn that ball over through the midfield and across half back. So, no doom and gloom, still pretty confident, going into the start of the year that, we might see some pretty special things from our group this year, but we need to get that right. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys again after the practice game this weekend.